The bond that is between the spouses is a very strong one, as described by Allah Azza wa Jal. And this bond is so strong that it is not to be forgotten, even if divorce takes place or a spouse dies, leaving the other one behind. The Prophet ﷺ was among those who honored people's memory, who would never forget a favor. ﷺ, when the Battle of Badr concluded and there were prisoners of wars, he said, if Al-Mut'am ibn Adi were alive and he interceded for these stinky prisoners, I would have set them free for his sake. Now remember, Al-Mut'am was a kafir and he's dead. But he did something in Mecca when the Prophet came ﷺ back from Taif, beaten up, tired, exhausted, and the people of Mecca were trying to kill him. Al-Mut'am ibn Adi stood up and said, Muhammad is in my protection. He honored the Prophet ﷺ, though he was against his religion, but he honored him. And the Prophet never forgot that for him. Likewise, the Prophet never forgot what his wife Khadijah did for him. So he always remembered her with goodness. And he always said, Khadijah, she was this, she was that, and Allah granted me children from her. Because none of his wives had a child from him, alayhi salatu wassalam. I know some would say, what about Maria, the Coptic? Maria is not a wife, she's a concubine. And this is why we did not mention her last class in the list of wives of the Prophet ﷺ, because she was not his wife, rather she was a concubine, a gift from the ruler of the Coptics in Egypt. Now, the Prophet ﷺ loved Khadijah and always remembered her with goodness, till the extent that Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, said, I was never jealous over any of the Prophet's wives more than I was jealous from Khadijah. And I have never seen her in my life. But because the Prophet ﷺ used to frequently remember her and mention her name, sometimes he would even slaughter a sheep and divide it, and he would ask these parts of the sheep to be sent to Khadijah's friends and relatives. And once I said, and I complained, O Prophet of Allah, as if there was no woman other than Khadijah in this world. And the Prophet said, she was this, she was that. And he started to mention her attributes. And I had not had a child except from her. And this is why she would refrain from mentioning Khadijah's name with anything negative, so that she would not upset the Prophet alayhi as-salatu was-salam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as a form of reward and a showing of his appreciation and gratitude to Khadijah, the Prophet never took a second wife over Khadijah until she died. So he remained, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with Khadijah for 25 years and refusing to marry or to take a second wife. And this shows you that the Prophet's marriage of women was not driven by desire or lust, as some of the enemies of Islam may say. he married Khadijah, who was older than him when he was 25 years of age. And he stayed with this older woman until he was 50, until she died. And if he had this huge desire and lust for women that was uncontrollable, if he was someone who wanted to fool around with women, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would have done that at the prime of his youth. But no, he was not that type that these enemies of Islam may try to portray, and they would fail repeatedly in doing so, sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam.